In this lecture, we're going to enable our workers to gather those supplies using the behavior tree. Let's get started. Remember this flowchart? This is how our worker will gather some supplies. And in this lecture, we're not going to do the whole thing. It's a little bit too much for one lecture. We're going to focus on this part, the middle section, where we'll move to a target. We're going to skip the isBusy part, begin gathering, and wait for that gather duration. And while in plain text, this seems very easy and very straightforward, it's a little more complicated to set it up end to end. Let's start in Unity in our behavior tree. You can see if we want to issue a new command, we have to extend our unit commands enum, so we get a new node for something like gather. And underneath that, we'd want to do something like move to a target gatherable supply, begin gathering that supply, wait some duration based on a scriptable object, and eventually we'll do more things like bring back the resources to our command post. If we just talk through that, we can tell that there's going to be some new Blackboard variables we need, probably some new custom nodes, and definitely changing our unit commands. So let's hop over into VS Code. In our unit commands, remember we can just add new entries to our enum like gather. If we save that, with just that change, come back into Unity, we can see that the Unity behavior system automatically generates that new node, gather. Perfect. If we recall how we implemented stop in a previous lecture, we can tell we're going to need to do something similar to issue this command to our unit. If we come back to VS Code, we can open up our worker class, which right now doesn't really do anything that our abstract unit doesn't do. It is a subclass of abstract unit, but it doesn't extend the behavior in any meaningful way. We're going to need to add some way for this worker to be able to gather some supply. Let's add a public void gather that accepts a gatherable supply. We can consider this the entry point for our actions, and in here we'll eventually be setting some Blackboard variables. In our Explorer, let's scroll up and find our scripts, commands. We need to add a new command, probably a gather command. So let's make that gather command.cs. We'll put that in our namespace, GameDevTV, RTS, commands, and make it a public class gather command that extends the action base. And let's implement that action base where we'll get the public override void can handle and the public override void handle. Let's attach the create asset menu with a file name of gather action, a menu name of AI commands gather, and an order of 105. In can handle, what do you think we should check here? We know that this has to be a worker. Workers are the only units that can gather. So let's return context.commandable is worker. And if the context.hit collider is not null, because we need to make sure that we clicked on something, and that something should be a gatherable supply instance, right? So we can also check and context.hit.collider.tryGetComponent out gatherable supply. Let's just reformat this a little bit. And since we're not actually going to use the supply reference there, we can use the discard naming convention where we use underscore, indicating we know we're getting something here, but we don't really need it. Now we know we've clicked on some gatherable supply and our commandable is a worker. So in handle, we can do worker equals context.commandable as worker. And that's the same as doing the typecast like this, but it's sometimes a little bit more convenient. Now we have a decision to make. How do we want our workers to handle moving to the gatherable supply? Should we tell them just to move to that location and then do something? Or should we tell them gather this and let the gathering behavior graph handle that? As usual, there's multiple options, and each of them has their own pros and cons. If we consider our graph here, we can tell that we're going to need to move, check if stuff is busy, and have some logic integrated in with the movement. And for that reason, I think it's best if we put the movement underneath the gather command. So we can just call worker.gather context.hit.collider.getComponent gatherable supply. We know that gatherable supply will be there because we'll call can handle first, and that checks if we do have that gatherable supply. Let's come into Unity and let's make that scriptable object command. In our project panel, units commands, let's go ahead and right click, create AI commands gather. We'll name it gather action, and I'm going to put this at slot 5. That's going to be the middle right square. Let's go ahead and attach that icon. We've got this mining icon. And this will require click to activate because we're going to click on this and then click where we want them to move. Again, on our units, worker, find our worker prefab, attach a new action, the gather action. Just to make sure that that shows up right, let's click play. We select a worker and perfect. We've got this icon here. We click on it. And if we click, nothing happens because we haven't hooked that up yet. That's okay. Let's exit play mode and come back to our worker behavior tree. Now in our gather, we're going to want them to move to a target location, maybe a target object, but for now, let's just duplicate this node, move to target location. We can copy and paste, and it keeps all of our Blackboard references to make it a little bit faster. So whenever we gather, we're going to move to that location, and then we're going to want to do something like gather the supplies, right? Well, that's this lecture's challenge. Create a new custom node, gather supplies, under a new custom category for actions, action/units. Add the story, unit gathers amount supplies from gatherable supplies. Then configure the keywords in the story that need to be variables from the Blackboard and assign them which type they should be. So we're looking for you to go through the creation of your own custom node. You don't have to implement the node, just create the node using the wizard in Unity Behavior. Once you've got that new custom node created, I'll see you back here. All right, welcome back. I hope you're able to do that because we've done very similar things here twice now with move to target location and stop moving. There's a shortcut. If you just right click in the background, create new action, that brings us right into the creation wizard. We'll call it gather supplies. And under category, we'll add a new custom category. This might have been what tricked you up because we haven't specifically done that, but it's that first entry right there on that dropdown. We'll do action/units there and click next. Now we can set up the story. We'll just put that in, unit gathers amount supplies from gatherable supplies. And I gave you a little bit of a hint here with the capitalization. Unit should be a game object. Amount should be an int. We know that from our gatherable supplies mono behavior. That's under basic types, integer. And then gatherable supplies. This one could have also been a tricky one for you. Under other, mono behaviors, game dev TV, RTS, environment, gatherable supply, we can have it not just be a game object, but we can require that it is a specific mono behavior. That's really cool. And if you just made this a game object, that's okay. We can correct that in VS Code in just a minute. I know we didn't cover that you can put in custom types in there yet. So if you put game object, that's still totally valid. We click create. We're going to put that in our scripts behavior. Go ahead and save that. And it's going to open VS Code automatically for us. And if you didn't do it exactly like that, you have two options. Number one, you can just delete this and do exactly what we just did. Or two, you can update our name, story, and category in the class you already generated. Whatever we have here in brackets needs to map the name exactly to what we have on the Blackboard variable. So unit, amount, gatherable supplies. And you need a serialized reference, public Blackboard variable of that particular type. So unit's going to be a game object, amount is going to be an int, and gatherable supplies is going to be a gatherable supply. Then of course you can put any category you'd like here. We want it to be action/units. And of course we have to put this in our namespace, game dev TV, RTS behavior. If you got here on your own, congratulations, you did an excellent job. If not, I hope you still got here and understand why we did it and how we did each of those steps. Now, in this, we can tell that we need a couple of things. Most importantly is when we entered, because according to our flowchart here, we've already moved here. We're skipping the isBusy check for the time being, and we are going to do begin gathering and wait for that gather duration. So in order to wait for some duration, we need to know when did we enter here so we can wait that appropriate time. Let's add a class member variable, private float, enter time, and on start, we can set that. Enter time equals time.time. And we're going to do more stuff in here later that could potentially make this fail. But for now, let's say gatherable supplies.value.begin gather. Remember, this is how we set the isBusy to be true. Then we want to wait some time. So on start needs to say, hey, we're still running. Then on update will get pulled every so often, not necessarily every frame, but every so often. We can check if gatherable supplies.value.supply.baseGatherTime plus the enter time is less than or equal to the time.time. That means we have passed the gather time. So we were going to want to return success. We've completed this node. Otherwise, we'll return status.running saying we're still waiting for that time to happen. And before we return success, we want to say gatherable supplies.value.endGather, which will set isBusy back to false and tell us how much we gathered. So maybe we want to store that as int amount gathered. And we're not quite being able to use that yet, but we will need to. So let's go ahead and add that anyway. On end, there's nothing left to do. So for the time being, let's remove that. We come over into our worker. We now know that whenever we want to gather something, we know that we need to set some Blackboard variables here because that's our interaction paradigm, right? We receive a command. We set up the Blackboard based on what should be happening and what we know, and then the behavior tree handles the rest. So let's try to say graph agent. Why doesn't this show up? Well, in our abstract unit, we've got our behavior graph agent marked as private. That means only this class can know about it. Our subclasses can't. And we can tell that we clearly need that in our subclass. So let's make it a protected behavior graph agent, which then allows our worker to reference it. Now we can say graph agent.set variable value, the supply. We know we need to set the command. So let's do graph agent set variable value command unit commands.gather. And finally, we also know that we need to set the target location based on the supply's current position. And we want to do that before the command is set. For that, we'll do graph agent, set variable value, target location, supply, transform, position. Let's come into Unity, and we know we need to extend our Blackboard to be able to execute this command. So on the Blackboard, we can click plus, again, other, mono behaviors, game dev TV, RTS environment, gatherable supply. We call this supply in the code, so capital SUPPLY. Let's drag that to the gatherable supplies, and our unit is going to be ourself. And we really have two ways to connect these. We can drag the arrow, just like what we did before, or we can make something called a sequence. By just dragging this and overlapping it with that self moves to target location, you can see this little blue line. If we drop it there, we can create a sequence, which will just go top down in order. Now, if we click play, select a unit both in the inspector and in the game view, and keep an eye on their command, we can then click gather and click on one of these minerals, and we'll see it's just not working. Our minerals here are on the default layer, but when we're left clicking to activate an action, we're only considering the floor layers. And we can clearly see that here in the player input. So it looks like we need a new layer mask to say what layers are interactable. Up here at the top of player input, let's duplicate that selectable unit layers and have an interactable layers. Then all the way down on handle left click, whenever we're going to issue an action, we don't want to only check the floor layers. We want to check our interactable layers combined with the floor layers. And we can do that with interactable layers, a single OR with the floor layers. That just combines our two layer masks here, giving us one new layer mask that has all of the interactable layers and all of the floor layers. It works just the same as a Boolean OR, but works for our layer masks. When we right-click, we probably also want to consider the interactable layers as well as the floor layer, because we can potentially issue actions when we right-click, right? So let's put that here as well, interactable layers or floor layers. And one more thing I just noticed, when we're doing this activate action, we're not actually checking if it can be handled, so we can end up in a bad situation here. Let's just wrap that ActiveAction.handle with if ActiveAction.canHandle the context, then we'll handle it. That way we won't issue any commands to any units that cannot handle that command. Back over in Unity, our interactable layers, we want to set up units buildings, and really we probably want a new layer for our supplies. So let's set that up, edit, project settings. Let's go to tags and layers and add a new one for supplies. In our physics settings, in our layer collision matrix, let's also make sure that the world bounds does not collide with supplies, and supplies does not interact with transparent effects. Then on our player input, we want to make sure that we've assigned our supplies as one of those interactable layers. I know we've kind of been bouncing around a little bit here, making sure that we hook up everything, but there's one more thing to do before we can click play and see this working end to end. We need to move our gatherable supplies to this new supplies layer. So let's select our mineral prefab. Let's go ahead and change it to the supplies layer. Only change this game object. And do the same thing for the gas. Let's click play. Make sure we select a worker like worker 6. Click on gather, click on a mineral, and there they go. They've got the command of gather. They've got the minerals as their supply, and they're doing that thing. So that's great. We've got them moving to a target, beginning the gathering process, and interacting with that supply. And we can even see that they are gathering, and our amounts on this supply are changing and going down every so often. And we see that isBusy is flickering. In the next several lectures, we're going to keep iterating on this process to get that full gathering behavior, where eventually they'll run over here to our command post and return those resources. When you're ready to continue, I'll see you on the next lecture.